Serious, Reddit. What was a simple gesture from a stranger or acquaintance that made all the difference? My father was terribly burned in a freak car repair accident when I was in my second month of being a freshman in high school. He was rushed to a world-class burn unit almost 2 hours away, and I was told, without seeing him, that he would remain there until he was better. This ended up being 20 days. My parents had been divorced a few years at that point and my mother lived out of state. My best friend at the time let me crash at his house with his family. That happened on a Friday night. The following Monday, I was called to the principal's office and found our landlord waiting on me. He was also a local judge. He had checked me out of school, then drove me to the county offices to enroll me in aid for dependent children, food stamps, and emergency funds. I later found out he didn't charge my father rent for the next year while he got back on his feet. I'll never forget how much that meant to me, and I know my dad was very grateful. They have both since passed. I used to work at a gas station and this older man came in to buy a newspaper but was $1 short. I gave him $1 and he asked my name and left. A few days later my boss told me someone left an envelope with my name on it. The man had written me a sweet little note saying thank you along with a $5 bill. IDKY, it made my day so much, but I still have the note in my wallet 3 years later. Do take a picture of it with your phone. Just get both, and do it now. The note is bound to get lost or damaged eventually, and you'll kick yourself for not having taken a quick snap at some point. I couldn't sleep the evening after my brother's funeral. I went to the cemetery in my PJs and sat next to the burial site. There was no headstone yet. In a daze, this old man walked up and sat next to me early the next morning. It was hard for him to lower himself into a sitting position on the ground, but he did. He didn't say anything. He just put his arm around my shoulders. I broke down and cried harder than I've ever cried before, and he just held me. After I had calmed down, he told me that he wanted to show me his wife's grave. He started talking to her like she was standing in front of us. He told her that my brother is new to heaven and that he'd appreciate it if she'd help him get settled in. I don't know exactly why, but it brought me so much peace. He was completely confident that his wife could hear him, which made me confident, and the idea of my brother having someone to take care of him was such a huge burden off of my chest. He walked me to my car and told me that he'll check on my brother every morning when he visits his wife. I never saw him again, but I will never ever forget him. I don't think I would have had the strength to walk away from the cemetery without his support. I'm sorry for your loss. Your story made me cry. I was longboarding one night and hit some broken concrete. The board stopped but I didn't. I knew to roll with the fall but I landed on my shoulder really hard. I didn't think anything was really wrong with me. Just figured I was going to hurt because my 200 pounds butt just flung itself violently onto cement. I walked to a nearby liquor store parking lot to check myself in the light and saw a lady leave the store and get in her car. She begins to pull out of the lot, sees me, and pulls back into the spot. As she gets out of the car she says, "Is your shoulder dislocated?" I tell her I don't know and explain what just happened. She tells me to stand straight and let my arms hang down at my side, looks me over, and says yup, that's out. Don't move. And with one quick jerk twist, I don't really know what she did. My shoulder was back in its proper place. She got in her car without another word and drove off. I was barely able to say thank you before she closed her car door. I went to a doctor the next day because my mom berated me into it, and they told me the lady did a great job and probably saved me from tearing something. I held the door open on the bus one day for an elderly lady, so the bus driver had to wait. At the time, my foot was sprained, and so to avoid pain I had it resting on a seat. Another lady decided that this was a war crime and yelled at me for a little bit, but the old lady I helped actually stepped in, yelled at the other lady, and then sat beside me. She was so wonderful. She was going on a blind date. At the age of 70 something, she was so excited to meet this man and had so much youthful energy. Just her telling me these things managed to make my day so much better and gave me so much positive energy. It was amazing. And had so much youthful energy. She knew she was getting laid that day, on top of being able to help a stranger. I'm sure she still remembers that day. You're not weird. You're just quiet. I was actually thinking about this last night. In 10th grade I was super socially awkward and shy. Because of this, the only real crowd I fit into was the misfits, who were often very obnoxious and not well liked by most people. I wasn't really like that, but since I associated with them I figured I was, and I always felt so embarrassed. It caused a bit of a snowball effect and I kept getting more shy and awkward. That is until I had a group project in math class. We spent that class split into groups, and in my group was a popular jock kid. I always thought he was a douche from a glance, but we ended up vibing pretty well. Once I'm comfortable with someone I open up and am able to socialize pretty well. He was one of the first non-outcasts to see this side of me, and by the end of the period he told me the quote, I'm paraphrasing though, and it left an impression on me. After that things started to change for the better and I became much more confident and outgoing in the end. Although we got along fine, we didn't exactly become friends, mostly due to different interests and stuff, so we didn't talk much after that year ended. Unfortunately, after graduation I heard he got into H and passed away from an overdose a few years later. Rest in peace, my friend. You have no idea how much you helped me. I had just delivered my son and found out that his blood sugar was low, so they immediately brought him to the NICU along with my husband, leaving me alone in the room. I was still trying to figure out what was going on, so I sat in my bed, sobbing because I was confused, worried, and just wanted to hold my baby. One of my nurses just happened to walk in and held my hand while I just continued to unleash these guttural sobs. Then after a while she reassured me that he was going to be okay. They did find an infection and it was treated, so now he's a healthy, happy toddler, but having that nurse there to comfort me while I was feeling so vulnerable meant the world to me. When my father died I didn't go to school for quite some time. When I went back, a teacher of mine handed me a letter and told me to read it at home. He offered me a helping hand and an open ear whenever I needed it, and it made me realize that there were people who cared, outside of my family. Nowadays I'm friends with said teacher. Alone in a foreign airport at 16, flying standby home, and missing every single flight. I was crying at the customer service desk trying to figure out where I was going next. A woman in a long sundress and a big floppy hat turned to me and said, "Honey, don't even worry about it." The same thing happened to me in Florence just last week, and it made me feel so much better about crying in public that I actually started laughing. Gave me the strength to make it the extra day or so of being totally stranded there. People who share in the woes of others are the best kind. I'm so glad she was there and made you feel better. About 6 years ago my grandmother was on a ventilator in the hospital. It happened fast and was devastating. I was missing work to spend the night shift with her. I worked night shift at the time. I was in the hospital cafeteria in the middle of the night. We were quietly talking and crying. I was telling my mom I couldn't afford my rent because I was missing work. There was an older couple a few tables away and I didn't think anything of it. A few minutes later I got up to go back to my grandmother's room when the woman stopped me. She grabbed my hand and told me I needed to stay with my grandmother and put her $100 in my hands. I started crying and telling her I could not accept her money. She insisted and hugged me and walked away. I have never been more moved by an act of kindness in my life. I will never forget her. This one finally got me. Hope you were able to spend more time with her. When I was 17, I was on my way to a hospital specialist. Due to a bad accident I had been in a couple months before. I had to drive myself and I was scared to death to drive downtown since I didn't know the area well and I was still struggling with issues from the accident. I was scared to drive. Of course I got lost. I finally stopped at a store to use the payphone. This was long ago, to ask a friend if they knew how to tell me where to go. He didn't. So I'm standing at the phone sobbing and scared, when an elderly lady walks up to me and asks me if I'm okay. I told her my predicament. This woman actually drove to the hospital, which turns out I was like half an hour out of the way, so that I could follow her there and not get lost. I'll never forget her, and I wish they had been a way for me to do something to say thank you, or even just say thank you. She didn't stop, just pointed out her window where I was supposed to park. What an awesome lady. 1998, early November, snowing like a bastard. One lane of the interstate I had to drive on to get home is closed. They're not plowing it, I'm forced out of my lane and my truck loses traction and I hit a guardrail at about 45 miles per hour. Fast forward to Christmas night. First time I've had to drive home from work in a snowstorm since. Roads are packed with last minute shoppers. I'm driving super slow and I'm a nervous wreck. About halfway home I notice the truck behind me is keeping up turn for turn. Even after all traffic leaves the highway they're behind me. They take my exit. They turn into my neighborhood. I pull into my driveway and they start to speed up. I run to the street and stop them thinking gee I'm about to get into some kind of fight. It's an older couple, probably 60s. They said that noticed I seemed nervous on the road and saw the damage to my truck. They wanted to make sure I got home safe for Christmas. They went 15 miles out of their way on Christmas night to make sure I was okay. Since then I've stopped and helped everyone I've seen on the side of the highway to try and pay it forward as they did for me. I think about those people often, and every Christmas I silently thank them for being there for me even though they didn't have to be, and I didn't need them to be. During Employee Appreciation Week at the university I work at, we had an activity where you could write anonymous thank you notes to co-workers for their efforts. I received one in my mailbox that read, "Thank you for being you. Your cheerful, friendly, open, and kind way is inspiring. I'm so glad you are a part of this community. It was so kind and unexpected." I teared up a bit. It hangs on my wall next to my desk. It makes me smile whenever I see it. Nothing better than anonymous love. Not one stranger, but multiple. I got an internship at an ad agency in high school and I was way in over my head. Even the basic intern work was hard because I was in NYC and they had me doing runs all across the city. One day I was carrying $300 worth of bathroom appliances for a commercial shoot. It was like 13 boxes all stacked to the brim in a giant bag. It was raining that day, and when I got on the subway the bag broke and all of the boxes went flying all over the floor. I tried gathering it all together but I had no way to carry all those boxes. I missed my stop. I thought I was screwed. One guy took a laptop out of an Apple bag and gave me the bag. Then someone else gave me an empty grocery bag. Then more and more people started giving me bags, and by the time I reached Grand Central I had enough bags to carry everything. Those random subway people saved me. The icing on the cake was that an old lady let me under her umbrella when I got out of the subway. So many random acts of kindness that day made me really appreciate the people of NYC. My oldest son, 4 years old, was having a meltdown and pushed over a recycle bin in a theme park, spilling out a bunch of empty bottles and whatnot. Embarrassed in front of a ton of people, my wife and I were faced with a dilemma. Pick up the mess to try to save face and limit the embarrassment, or hold our ground and make him clean up the mess he made in anger. We decided to hold our ground, and yes, it caused even more of a commotion. After a while he finally came to his senses and started cleaning up the mess, and we told him we would help if he started cleaning up first. Mess cleaned and on we went. About 10 minutes later another family comes up to us and the wife says something to the effect of, "I saw what happened and I want to affirm you for how you handled things. You were both great parents in that situation and I admire that." Talk about a 10-second statement from a stranger that can turn around a sour mood. Seriously though, that's some awesome parenting. Down to the helping out when he got it started. You couldn't have done it better. One cold morning, very early, I start my car to go to work. Already in a sour mood to have to leave early and go to work in the cold, I realize that I have a flat tire and pull into the Safeway parking lot all but across the street from where I lived. All but grumbling at my luck, I get out of the car and go to the trunk for the spare, thinking about how cold and crappy the tire change is going to be. Then, I notice a man park next to me and get out of his car and approach me. I got a little nervous and taken aback at his approach, but he immediately started helping change the tire. I was completely dumbfounded at first, but we worked together and put the spare tire on in no time. Then, he left and he said, "Have a good holiday season. Pass it forward." Not only did it immediately turn my bad day into a good one, but I always helped people after that, especially around the holidays, and that was a good 12 years ago. People who do things for no reason other than kindness are the reason kindness still exists in the world. Good for you for paying it forward. As a kid, my home life was less than stellar. I had spent time in foster care and my mom was an abusive bipolar alcoholic. Good times. She met my stepdad when I was 9 and we moved to his farm. We were poor but had our basic needs covered. My self-esteem was low. My parents chain smoked, so I smelled like smoke all the time. I wore second-hand clothes and no-name brands. We had a party at school in the 5th grade where a few parents volunteered. The day after the party, a girl in my class told me that her mom said I was going to be beautiful when I grew up. That made me feel good. I went to the 10-year class reunion and ran into that girl. She told me that her mom was right all those years ago. I don't think I'm beautiful. Pretty, maybe, but that night, I felt beautiful. When you're beat down as a kid, hearing something nice just feels amazing. Capital X. Stories like this remind me how much I appreciate people who can see beauty no matter where they look. I'm so glad your life was touched by one of these angels. Happened twice today, actually. For context, I work front door security at a courthouse. I'm not a cop, but rather contracted private security. The company I work for was hired by the sheriff's office to fill vacancies in the courts, mainly the front door so that the deputies can do other things. My hair grows kinda slow. I can usually make it about 2 months before I need another cut. Yesterday Sunday was my bi-monthly haircut. As the court employees were coming in before we opened to the public this morning, 4 different employees complimented my haircut. "It looks great, man," one guy said. 2 girls said it made me look cuter and an older female said it made me look downright handsome. After that, one of the deputies also complimented my haircut. "They are right, it looks great," she said. Around 2 p.m., a mom and her kids came in. Mom put her stuff in the bucket for the x-ray machine and then they all walked through the metal detector. As mom was collecting her things on the other side of the machine, her son, maybe 5 at most, says to me, "You're my hero. Can I give you a hug?" "Heck yeah you can, buddy." Knelt down, gave him a hug, and then his older sister, maybe 7 or 8, joined in to make it a group hug. He definitely mistook me for a cop, but I'm not about to correct a 5-year-old on something like that. Between those kids and the employees and deputy complimenting my haircut, this is the best Monday I've had in years. On my way home, my windshield wiper blade fell apart while I was driving on the freeway. It was winter, sleety, slushy, snowy, salty, you gotta have wipers kind of weather. I purchased a new one at a rural hardware store on the way home and was standing in an empty bank parking lot struggling to get the new one on. Near to tears, gloves off, fingers frozen, and a man saw me, came over and put the new wiper blade on like nothing. Fellow Minnesotan to the rescue. I am so grateful to that man. I'll never forget it. Midwesterners are the best. In SD I was visiting. I used to live there and borrowed my brother's car. The cap got stuck and it was really cold and I couldn't get it off. I was on E. I told the gas station dude and he happily grabbed a pair of pliers and yanked it off for me. A random customer dude came out too. They were so nice. I had just broken my back as a combat engineer for the US Army. My wife was bipolar and suicidal. She had recently had an episode where she thought she was in the army and somehow outranked my superiors. I don't want to get into it more than that, but suffice it to say the unit was abuzz with that information and I was super depressed. I was in the orderly room staring down at the ground when an NCO from 1st Platoon came by and said, "Ain't nothing down there for you. Hold your head up." And I did. Still do too. It's been 15 years since then. Things haven't improved as fast as I like, but progress is progress, right? Ain't nothing down there for you. Hold your head up. Hot dang. That's such a great saying, I swear. Military fricks figure out some of the best turns of phrase in the world. I'm glad you're at least a bit better, and let's both drive to keep doing better than we were before. A professor saw I was having a hard time on a math problem and sat down with me and slowly explained each step. It really helped and it was very nice because he wasn't my teacher. My daughter was having trouble with double-digit multiplication, so I sat down and showed her the way I was taught. The look on her face as she understood the math that was going into the problem is something I will remember on my deathbed. A few years ago, I was going through a very tough time. In just a few short months I lost 2 dogs, my grandpa, my dad, my job, and my wife to divorce. My son was still a tiny thing. One night, I was driving with my son on about a 12-hour trip. He got sick and was throwing up. Luckily, a Target was off the exit I took. It was pouring rain. Disheveled me gets my son inside Target. I'm soaking wet. He is crying and vomiting. Any parent knows how seeing your child like this just guts you. And I'm frantically searching for medicine while trying to calm him down. It was at this moment everything just hit me. Here I am, this grown man, with a sick child, in a strange Target, and I just broke down and cried. I'm pushing my son around just sobbing. It was soon that this elderly man, maybe 65, just comes up to me and talks to me. I just unload my story on this guy. He sat there with me just listening. He got both my son and me to stop crying, even making us both laugh a little. Once I was calmed, he just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It'll be alright, son. It always gets better. I promise." That man has no idea how profoundly he impacted me with his time and those simple words. Tough time, that's a huge understatement, my friend. I have nothing but respect for you and wish nothing but the best for you and your son. My brother went to his counselor at school to tell her he wouldn't be attending school next year. My aunt wasn't going to take us in anymore. Financial problems from my parents in Mexico. A lady overheard him and offered him to stay with her. She found out about me and still took us in. She became our foster mom for a few years, to which I'm eternally grateful. It blows my mind how someone can offer so much kindness to a stranger. Bit of a backstory. I always hated Valentine's Day for a plethora of reasons. Unfortunately, my top reason now is my mother died on Valentine's Day. So it was Valentine's Day, 3 years after my mother had passed away. I was on dialysis at that time and had a particularly bad session that day, with the combination of emotions of dealing with the anniversary of my mom's death. I was having a tough day. I work in a hospital and was sitting in my car for a few minutes trying to mentally prepare myself for my upcoming shift. I noticed a woman parked next to me but shut my eyes and tried doing a few breathing exercises to calm my emotions. After a couple of minutes I heard a knock on my window. This lady was taking goodie bags into the hospital for children visiting their family members. She simply said, "It looks like you're having a tough day, so I wanted to give you this," and handed me a goodie bag. As she walked away I started to cry. It was such a simple gesture from one human to another, and I hadn't realized how bottled up I had been keeping my emotions, and I wish I could thank her again. TLDR. Woman gave me a goodie bag and I cried. Trying to mentally prepare myself for my upcoming crap. Had a good laugh at this one. Sweet story though. My father had suffered from Alzheimer's for 4 years. The disease had taken from him not only his memory but his sharp wit, his sense of humor, and his ability to speak. After a family gathering in a park, I walked him back to the car. As I helped him into the passenger seat, he looked at me and said thank you. It took me about 5 minutes to register that he had spoke, something he had not done in several months. It was the last words he spoke to me. But what lovely last words. Bless you. My senior year of high school, I suddenly realized that I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. My life started to spiral and my grades were suffering as I sat in classes I hated. One night, after our school band's last performance, I gave one of the younger drummers a ride home. We pretty much sat in silence. We knew each other from the band and living in the same neighborhood, but never really talked much. When I dropped him off, he got out of the car. He took a couple steps, then, in pouring rain, turned around, came back to the car and said good luck next year. He was the only person up to that point who had wished me luck. It was a simple courtesy, but it struck me deeply. It helped me get through what was a tough time in my life. It's so strange how the words of people we barely know can uplift our spirits in the worst of times. Sometimes strangers can be the kindest. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.